Scores of days. How many? He was approaching the end of his 3rd year in the town, so it had been over 1,000. 1,000 deaths and resurrections. Today would be no different. He finished his espresso and stood up. He toyed with going back to see Laura, but nothing he could say would change a thing now. He elected instead to walk around town, choosing again to live his life as if he controlled his fate. Besides, he much preferred dying outside. No one stopped him as he crossed the common room, pushed open the inn's heavy wooden door, and stepped onto the street. Midsummer was approaching, and the warm morning breeze carried the sticky promise of a day's heat and humidity. The inn sat at the first level stretch of the main road through the town after it had climbed up from the harbour on its way to the mountain pass. He looked down to the sea. Too many people and too many smells. He turned toward the mountain, remembering a small glade nestled in trees overlooking the town and the Medicean. A good place to think, and as good as any to die. He began walking. 1,000 deaths and resurrections. 1,000 times asking himself when it would stop. 1,000 times begging for it to stop. His jaw tightened as he walked. No, he had stopped begging a long time ago. But he had never stopped asking why. In the beginning, due perhaps to the Christolic upbringing of the townspeople whose lives he briefly led each day, he had assumed that he was being punished for some heinous act in his now forgotten former life. The Christolic faith preached stridently of sin and retribution in all its canons. Back then, he had reasoned that if he knew what he'd done to deserve this fate, he could find an appropriate act of atonement and win his release. But his past was an unreachable land, hidden behind mountains in his memory, as impassable as the strange peaks that enclosed this town. With no hope of fitting a crime to his sentence, he had come to wonder if this was not punishment, but simply cruel fate, a game played by the gods. He had then searched each day for the precise act required by those imagined deities to end the cycle. He trudged on. The road was climbing again, and he passed the last of the poorer houses, mostly mere shacks, on the edge of town. The air here was heavier away from the sea, and Rinaldi's fat body was sweating freely. Despite the heat, Stranger felt a chill as he considered, not for the first time, that perhaps there was no secret act to this game. The road split a meadow and then a wood, and he began to search for the path into the trees that led to the glade. Finding it, he left the road for the welcome cool of forest shade. He walked for another half-mile before bright sunshine shone ahead of him again. He stepped into the glade, and stopped. A young woman, at his favourite spot, on a large boulder at the edge of the cliff. From there, Stranger liked to gaze out on to the Medicean, imagining himself on a ship sailing away from the town forever. But the woman had her back to that scene, and was instead staring directly at him, as if she had been expecting him. She stood up when she saw him, tall and shapely, with long black hair and a dress of robin egg blue. She recalled memories from Rinaldi of a younger Laura. Stranger would have called her beautiful, but for the sadness in those green eyes that pierced his heart, pinning him to the spot where he stood. Something familiar about her tickled his mind, and he searched Rinaldi's memories. He felt a rare jolt of surprise when he realized that the innkeeper did not recall her. She walked toward him. That motion seemed to release Stranger from her spell. He crossed the glade to stand in front of her. "You don't know me, do you, Mr. Rinaldi?" she asked. Her voice was deeper and huskier than he had expected. An old memory of Rinaldi stirred but did not awaken. He shook his head, waiting for the revelation of some past sin of Rinaldi's to come to her. "My name is Marie. 5 years ago, I worked at the inn for the former owner, the widow Varpon, as a scullery maid and tavern hostess," she said. "When you and your wife purchased the inn, you claimed some silverware was missing. You told the widow that I was the culprit. I was working for her as her personal maid then. She fired me and spread the tale throughout the town. No one would give me work. I had to turn to selling myself, to all the respectable businessmen who would not hire me, but would bed me." Rinaldi's memory of the event finally awoke in Stranger. He stared down at her, into those eyes that seemed so familiar. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing it would do no good. But she surprised him. She shook her head. "I never knew who told the widow, until this morning when I saw you in the window of the inn, and it came to me as in a dream. But I am not here to accuse you. I forgave you long ago, even if I didn't know until now who I forgave." Again, Stranger felt surprise. He had never been forgiven. She smiled. "You see, it was true. I did steal the silverware. At first I cursed my unknown judge, but I came to accept my own role in my fate. I saw myself for the greedy, lazy thing I was. She turned and walked to the boulder, seating herself, and she stared down at the town, his prison, spread out below them. He sat beside her. She smelled of wild candy-berries and sweat. I found that I had other skills. I taught myself crafts, learning more each year. I support myself now by selling weaving and carvings, but the townspeople still treat me as a whore. They can't see me for who I truly am. Stranger swallowed, staring at her. Why are you telling me this? She looked at him, and he again felt a memory stir, then slip away. I thought you would understand, she said, because they can't see who you truly are either. As he wondered what she meant, the sound of breaking branches made them both turn to the forest. He could hear angry voices approaching.